I always knew my mother was a master manipulator, but I never expected her to use my daughter as a Trojan horse to stalk my every move. My name is Lee Miller. I'm 34 years old, and the last time my parents laid eyes on my daughter, they sent her back to me physically shaking. She was only 7. Maya walked through our front door clutching a wrapped box against her chest like it was about to detonate. Her eyes were bloodshot from crying, and her bottom lip wouldn't stop quivering. "Grandpa said I had to give you this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He said to tell you not to make a scene." I dropped to my knees, took the box from her trembling hands, and told her to go get washed up for dinner. I waited until I heard the bathroom door click shut before I started peeling back that cheerful wrapping paper. What I found inside made me pick up my phone and dial 911 immediately. But let me tell you, the cops were just the tip of the iceberg. What went down over the next 48 hours would rip the lid off every sick secret my parents had been burying for decades. And it forced my husband to look a terrifying truth in the face that he'd been dodging for years. Welcome back to Real Reddit Revenge. This is where we put the spotlight on the family drama that actually changes lives. The messy, the toxic, and the moments where you finally say enough. Drop a comment below if you've ever been gaslit into thinking you were overreacting, when you were actually just trying to be a good parent. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep the lights on. Now let me take you back to where this all started. I grew up in a tiny town called Crestview, Ohio. It's the kind of place where your business is everyone's business, where the gossip moves faster than the Wi-Fi. In our house, there were 2 kids, Caleb and me. Caleb was the golden boy, the responsible one. I was the sensitive one. That's the label my mother, Alina, slapped on me the second I could talk. "Lee is just so thin-skinned," she'd tell the neighbors. "She takes everything way too personally. You can't even look at her funny without a waterworks display." She said it with this fake sweet tone, the way you describe someone with a permanent injury. Not quite mean, but definitely a flaw. Caleb was the star athlete. Caleb worked 3 jobs in high school. Caleb graduated at the top of his class. My mother kept his trophies polished on the fireplace mantel like holy relics. My senior portrait. That was shoved in the hallway behind the coat rack where you'd have to move 3 jackets just to see my face. When I told them I wanted to go to nursing school, my mother literally dropped her fork and looked at me like I was a grease stain on her favorite rug. "Girls like you should focus on finding a husband who can handle you first," she snapped. "Then maybe we can talk about hobbies like school." I applied anyway. I got in. My father, Bill, muttered a quick good job in the driveway once when my mom wasn't around to hear him. Meanwhile, Alina told everyone at church that I'd moved out because I was selfish and abandoning the family. I paid for every single credit hour with predatory loans and back-to-back double shifts at a greasy spoon called the Rusty Spoon. 4 years of hell. I came out with a degree and $217,000 in debt. My parents didn't offer a single dime. But here's the kicker, something I never told a soul. Every single month during nursing school, I scraped together $200 and sent it home. For their groceries, their electric bill, whatever. My mother never thanked me. Not once. She never even acknowledged the money existed. In our house, being sensitive meant you stayed quiet, and staying quiet was the only way to stay safe. Caleb is 3 years older than me, 37 now. He's in high-end medical sales. Big baller salary, company Lexus, the whole 9 yards. It's the kind of job my mother loves because she can brag about his title during bridge club. When Caleb bought his first mansion, my parents handed him a check for $42,000 for the down payment right in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. They made a whole production out of it. My mom gave a tearful speech. My dad gave him a firm, proud handshake. 2 years later, when Mark and I bought our modest fixer-upper, Alina just sighed and said, "I hope you didn't bite off more than you can chew." That was it. No check, no handshake, no congrats. I didn't hate Caleb for it. He was just a product of that toxic environment, too. He figured out early on that my mother's love had a very specific price tag, and he paid it without flinching. He wore the right brands, married a status wife, and never missed a Sunday dinner without bringing a vintage bottle of wine and a fake compliment for my mother's dry pot roast. And not once, not in 37 years, did Caleb ever stand up for me when her words started drawing blood. I remember one Thanksgiving when I was 22. My mother told the whole table I'd really let myself go since starting my clinicals. Caleb just chuckled. My father focused on his mashed potatoes. I excused myself and sobbed in the bathroom for exactly 11 minutes before wiping my face and going back out. Caleb never apologized. I didn't realize then that Caleb would eventually be the one to save us, or that it would cost him every single thing he spent his life building. But that's for later. Back then, my brother and I were like two people living in the same apartment complex, but on totally different floors. Same address, completely different weather. I met my husband, Mark, at a Home Depot. He was loading up lumber for a deck project. I was staring blankly at smoke detectors because mine had been chirping for 3 weeks and I was too tired to deal with it. He saw me looking overwhelmed and said, "Go with the one with the 10-year lithium battery. Trust me on this one." We were married 2 years later. I wanted something low-key, a backyard vibe, 30 friends, wildflowers in recycled jars. My mother demanded a cathedral wedding with 200 guests she barely knew. I stood my ground and went with the backyard. She didn't speak to me for 3 months. Mark kept saying, "She'll come around, Lee. Family is family." He meant it too. He came from a normal family that argued over the Super Bowl and made up over dessert. He didn't understand that some families don't argue over sports. They argue over power, and they never, ever make up. When Maya was born, my mother showed up at the hospital 40 minutes after I gave birth. I hadn't even called her. I didn't tell her I was in labor. To this day, I don't know how she knew. She strolled into the room while I was still shaking from the delivery, snatched Maya out of the bassinet before the ink on her footprints was dry, and held her tight. "There she is," she whispered. "There's my girl." Not Lee's daughter, not Mark's baby. Hers. Mark looked at me, confused. I just stared at the ceiling, too exhausted to fight. A saint of a nurse came in and confiscated the baby for a weight check that definitely wasn't on the schedule. I mouthed "thank you" to her, and she just gave me a knowing wink. Some people just get it. Eleanor called Maya her little angel, but she said it the way a person talks about their car or their house. It was ownership disguised as affection. Within 6 months, she'd bought Maya a whole wardrobe of lace dresses and patent leather shoes. The kind of doll clothes Maya hated once she realized she preferred mud puddles and overalls. When I told my mother that Maya couldn't have her homemade cookies because of a dairy sensitivity, Eleanor just waved her hand like I was being dramatic. "One cookie won't kill her, Lee. I raised 2 kids and they're fine." I snapped back. "Mom, her stomach literally hurts for days when she has dairy." Eleanor just looked at Maya and cooed. "Mommy is just being a big meanie, isn't she, Angel? But Grandma understands." Maya was 4. She had no idea she was being recruited into a war. Mark watched from the sidelines, always the peacemaker. "She means well," he'd say. "Just pick your battles." But this wasn't about cookies. This was about a woman who had spent 30 years breaking me down and was now moving on to her next project. During that same visit, she brought over a stuffed bear from her attic, old corduroy, button eyes, a torn ear. "This was yours," she told Maya. "Your mommy used to sleep with this every night. Now it belongs to you." Maya squeezed it and named it Button. I watched my daughter hold a piece of my childhood I didn't even remember giving away, and something about the handoff felt sinister. It wasn't the toy, it was the way my mother gave it to her. It was calculated, like she was planting a flag on new territory. The shift happened slowly, like a leak in the ceiling before the whole roof caves in. Maya started refusing her greens. "Grandma says I don't have to eat the yucky stuff." She stopped wearing the clothes I picked out, calling them ugly compared to Grandma's pretty dresses. Then, the real gut punch came. Maya asked me from the backseat of the car, "Mommy, why are you always so mean to Grandma?" I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "I'm not mean to her, baby." "She says you are. She says you're always mad." I pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and just sat there in the dark. My daughter was 7 years old and she was already being taught that love is a competition where you have to pick a side. That night, after Maya was tucked in, I confronted Mark. "She's doing it again. She's doing to Maya exactly what she did to me." Mark looked up from his phone, finally seeing the panic in my eyes. What do you mean? The constant comparisons, the undermining, the little jokes that are actually poison. She's turning my own daughter against me. She's the good one and I'm the bad one. I'm done, Mark. Mark actually listened this time. What do you want to do? I want boundaries, real ones. Mark called them that night. I heard him being calm and logical, followed by a long silence, and then my mother's voice screaming so loud I could hear the screeching through the phone. 20 minutes later, my dad called back and told Mark we were tearing the family apart. On Tuesday, I sent a text. I drafted it 3 times. Mom, we need to set some ground rules for your time with Maya. We love you, but things have to change. Silence. She didn't reply Tuesday, or Wednesday, or Thursday. 5 days of the silent treatment. The same punishment she used on me when I was a kid. Then, on the 6th day, she went public. She posted a photo of her and Maya at the park with a caption that read, "Missing my angel. Some people don't realize how precious grandparents are until it's too late. Prayers appreciated." 30 likes in an hour. 14 comments calling me a monster without even knowing my name. "Stay strong, Alina," one read. "Some children are just ungrateful." My face was on fire. That afternoon, Pastor Mike from my parents' church called. "Lee, your mother is a wreck. The Bible says to honor your father and mother." I told him, "Pastor, I asked for respect, and she gave me 5 days of silence and a Facebook smear campaign." He just sighed, "But she's still your mother." I hung up and called my dad, demanding to know why she was acting like this. Bill's response was the same old script. "You know how she is, Lee. Don't overreact. She's telling you the same. Just drop it." Then came the box. Maya had spent Friday night at their place because Mark convinced me to extend an olive branch. My dad dropped her off Saturday morning. He didn't even get out of the truck. He just let her out in the driveway, handed her a box, and drove off without a word. Maya stood on the porch, holding that box wrapped in yellow daisy paper. She wasn't smiling. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Grandpa said tell you not to make a scene," she whispered. I got her settled with a sandwich and some cartoons, then I took that box into my bedroom and closed the door. I peeled back the paper. Inside were stacks of photographs. Every single photo my mother had of me from my childhood, birthdays, Christmas, even my nursing graduation. But in every single one, my face had been surgically removed with scissors. It wasn't a jagged tear. It was a precise, cold-blooded cut. Every image of me was just a hole in the paper. Under the photos was a note in her perfect cursive. "You chose to leave this family. We're just making it official." And at the very bottom was Button, the corduroy bear. I picked it up, and it felt heavy, unnaturally heavy. I flipped it over and saw the seam on its belly. The original stitching was fine, but a 2-inch section had been resewn with thick, messy thread. I grabbed my kitchen shears, snipped the new thread, and reached inside. My fingers hit something hard and plastic, a tile tracker. It was active. The little green light was blinking every few seconds. For a heartbeat, I went numb. Then my nurse brain kicked in. I didn't cry. I acted. I dropped the tracker into a Ziploc bag, sealed it, and dialed 911. "I'd like to report a stalking device placed on my minor child's property," I told the operator. Then I called Sarah, my best friend and a high-powered paralegal. "I need you at my house, right now." "I'm already in the car," she said. I looked at Maya in the next room, completely unaware that the bear she'd been cuddling all night had been transmitting our exact location to her grandmother every second. My phone buzzed. A text from Alina. "Did my angel get home safe?" It wasn't a question. It was a taunt. Sarah beat the police by 5 minutes. She took one look at the table, the shredded photos, the letter, the bear's guts, and went into combat mode. "Screenshots. Now, every text, every Facebook post, every voicemail from the last year. I'm bagging the physical evidence." She photographed everything from every angle. The death by 1,000 cuts, photos, the tracker, the note. Officer Miller arrived shortly after. He looked at the tracker and frowned. "Ma'am, tracking someone without their consent is a serious crime in this state. You're saying this was inside your daughter's toy." Yes, I said, my voice finally shaking. My parents gave it to her this morning. Sarah stepped up. Officer, we're going to need the paperwork for an emergency protective order immediately. He explained the process, filing at the courthouse, a judge's review, and a same-day order if the evidence was strong enough. And trust me, the evidence was screaming. If you're watching this and you've ever found something in your kid's backpack or room that made your heart stop, listen to your gut. You aren't sensitive. You're observant. Tell me your story in the comments. And stick around, because you won't believe what we found when we looked into my brother's perfect life next. The front door creaked open again, but it wasn't Mark coming back from the hardware store. It was Caleb. My brother, the undisputed golden boy of the Miller family, was standing on my front step looking like he'd just crawled out of a car wreck. His button-down was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and his eyes were raw like he'd been staring into the sun. He was clutching a thick manila folder against his thigh, trying to hide it and present it at the same time. "I need to talk to you, Lee," he rasped, his voice cracking. "I need to say this before Mom realizes I'm not at the office." I just stood there, paralyzed. This was the same brother who had spent 3 decades watching my mother dismantle my self-esteem. The same brother who laughed at the Thanksgiving table when a leaner called me unstable. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, the golden child looked absolutely terrified. "Come in," I said, my voice cold. He stepped inside and stopped dead. He saw Sarah, our high-powered paralegal friend, standing by the counter. He saw the Ziploc bag containing the blinking GPS tracker. He saw the table covered in my childhood photos, every single one of them featuring a jagged hole where my face used to be. Caleb's face went a sickly shade of gray. "She actually did it," he whispered, almost to himself. "She really went through with the erasure." Officer Miller looked up from his notebook, his hand resting near his belt. "And you are?" "Caleb Miller. I'm her brother, and I think I have the rest of the puzzle you're looking for." I led Caleb into the living room. He sat on the very edge of the sofa, looking like he might bolt at any second. I stayed standing. I didn't want to be on his level. Sarah leaned against the doorframe, her arms crossed, her lawyer brain clearly recording every twitch of his face. 10 minutes later, the front door flew open again. This time it was Mark. He'd seen the patrol car in the driveway and practically took the door off the hinges. He was still in his work boots, tracking mud across the rug, his face a mask of pure adrenaline. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes darting from the cop to Sarah, then finally landing on Caleb. The temperature in the room dropped 30 degrees. "What the hell is he doing in my house?" Mark's voice was low, vibrating with a rage I hadn't seen in years. We hadn't spoken to Caleb in over 3 years, not since he stood in our mother's kitchen and told the entire extended family that I was poisoning the well by asking for basic boundaries. Caleb stood up, his hands up in a defensive gesture. "Mark, man, please, just listen." "No," Mark barked, pointing a finger at the door. "You don't get to show up here and play the concerned brother after 3 years of helping her gaslight my wife. Get out." "He's here to tell us something, Mark," I said, stepping between them. And based on the look on his face, "You're going to want to hear it." I made them both sit. It was the most uncomfortable seating arrangement in history. Caleb laid the manila folder on the coffee table. His hands were steady now, but his jaw was so tight I thought his teeth might snap. "Mom has been meeting with a family law specialist named Garrett Loomis," Caleb began. "She's not just looking for visitation, Lee. She's building a case for full custody. She wants to take Maya away from you permanently." He spread the contents across the table like he was dealing a hand of poker. It was a nightmare in print. There were chains of emails, draft petitions, and pages of handwritten notes in my mother's elegant, terrifyingly precise script. I picked up a page titled Project Angel. It was a list of evidence she'd been manufacturing. Lee leaves Maya with unvetted sitters for 20-plus hours a week. Neglect. Lee enforces restrictive eating habits, likely an eating disorder by proxy. Lee is deliberately isolating the child from her paternal and maternal support systems. Lee shows signs of worsening emotional instability and paranoia. It was a total work of fiction. Every line was a lie dressed up in legal terminology to make me look like a danger to my own daughter. Mark leaned forward, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. She wrote this. She actually sat down and plotted to kidnap our kid using the court system. Caleb nodded. It gets worse. She asked me to testify. She wanted me to go on the record and say that I've witnessed concerning outbursts from Lee. She even tried to coach me on a story about seeing Lee strike Maya in a grocery store 2 years ago, something that never happened. The room went so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Mark's voice came out as a dangerous whisper. She asked you to commit perjury, to lie under oath to steal a child from her parents. Yes, Caleb said. He looked at me and his eyes filled with tears. And Lee, for a split second, I almost talked myself into it. I almost convinced myself that she knew best, because she's the mother. Because she's always been the one in charge. That's how she raised us, right? To believe her word was law. Sarah snatched up one of the emails, her eyes darting across the text. These are admissible, she said, her voice sharp and clinical. Your mother was dumb enough to put her conspiracy in writing to her lawyer. She's documenting her own intent to commit fraud. This folder isn't just a warning, it's a weapon. Caleb's gaze drifted to the kitchen counter, landing on the Ziploc bag. She really put a tracker in the bear, the old corduroy one. He looked back at me, horrified. That bear sat on the hallway shelf for 20 years. She used to call it Lee's heart. She kept it all this time just to turn it into a bug. She doesn't see people, Caleb, I said. She sees property, and now she's trying to foreclose on my life. I had to take a breath. My mind went back to the Thanksgiving that finally broke us, the day I realized there was no fixing my family. We were at their house, 12 people around a table overflowing with food that nobody was actually enjoying. My father was at the head, Alina at the foot, everyone arranged like pawns in a play she'd been directing for 40 years. Maya was 7. She'd been running around with her cousins for 8 hours straight and was hitting that wall of exhaustion where kids start to crumble. I'd leaned over and said, Maya, baby, it's bedtime. Let's go brush those teeth. My mother didn't even stop chewing. She just set her wine glass down with a heavy clink. Lee, don't be such a martyr. It's Thanksgiving. One late night isn't going to scar her for life. She's wiped, Mom. She needs a routine. I raised 2 children who stayed up until midnight every holiday, and they turned out just fine. Stop being so controlling. You're sucking the joy out of the room. You had 2 children, Mom, I replied, my voice steady but loud enough for the whole table to hear. And I am the parent of this one. I am asking you as her grandmother to respect my decision. The table went dead. 12 people and not a single fork moved. My mother's eyes didn't flare with anger. They filled with weaponized tears. She did the lip tremble, the soft sob, the whole 9 yards. I just wanted one night of family peace, she whimpered. And you have to ruin it. You always have to be the center of attention, don't you, Lee? You always ruin everything. And that's when Caleb, the golden boy, set down his napkin and delivered the killing blow. Lee, seriously, why do you have to make everything about you? Just let her stay up. My father didn't even look up from his turkey. Your mother is an old woman. Show some respect for once. Mark had seen enough. He stood up, grabbed our coats, and said, We're leaving. I picked up a half-asleep Maya and we walked out. Nobody followed us. My mother's voice followed us through the door. Fine, take her, you take everything anyway. We drove home in 37 minutes of pure, ringing silence. Back in the present day, Caleb reached into the folder one more time. He pulled out a stack of photocopied pages from a small blue notebook. There's more, he said. This is her log. The pages were filled with my mother's handwriting, meticulous, dated entries. It was a surveillance log of my life. September 14th, Lee dropped Maya at school at 7:52. Picked up at 3:15. Sitter on Thursdays, possible neglect, follow up. October 3rd, Maya mentioned eating cereal for dinner, nutritional deficiency. October 18th, teacher name, Mrs. Koenig, room 204, verified phone number. November 1st, pediatrician Dr. Patel, Lee missed the flu shot window, reschedule, neglect pattern forming. It went on for 7 months. Every innocent question she'd ever asked Maya over a cookie or a playdate, "What did Mommy cook? Who watches you when Daddy is at work?" was actually a deposition. She was building a dossier to prove I was unfit. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my skin crawling. "Her desk drawer. She left it unlocked while she was in the shower last week," Caleb explained. Sarah took the copies, her eyes narrowing as she read. "This is professional-level stalking," she said. "Your mother hasn't been a concerned grandmother for a long time. She's been a private investigator with a vendetta. She was building a case to take your child before you even knew there was a problem." Mark walked to the window, staring out at the street. "How long has she been doing this, Caleb? Truly." "The notebook starts in September," Caleb said. "But the planning, I think she started the day you told her she couldn't stay at the hospital for a week after the birth. She never forgot that insult." I looked at the cover of the notebook. In her beautiful, flowing script my mother had written, "Everything I do for Maya." It was the ultimate shield. She truly believed she was the hero of a story where I was the villain. I looked at Caleb, the brother who finally realized he was next on the chopping block. "Why now, Caleb? Why risk her love to tell me this?" Caleb sat back, rubbing his face. "Because Amanda is 8 weeks pregnant. We saw the ultrasound last week. And when I looked at that little heart beating on the screen, all I could think was, when does the notebook for my kid start? When does she decide Amanda isn't good enough? When does she put a tracker in my nursery?" He paused, his voice breaking. "I told her I wouldn't testify. She told me if I didn't fall in line, I was dead to her. Just like you." She actually used those exact words. "Welcome to the club," I said. "I've been dead to her since I was 22. Sarah looked at Caleb with the cold focus of a hunter. "Caleb, your testimony as a whistleblower is the final nail. You can confirm the notebook, the custody fraud, and the request for perjury. Are you willing to go on the record?" Caleb looked at the shredded photos of my face on the table. "Yes, I'm done being the golden child. I'd rather be the one who finally tells the truth." Sarah spread her hands on the table. "Here, where we stand. We have the GPS tracker for the stalking charge. We have the notebook for the surveillance. We have the emails for the intent to commit fraud. And we have the shredded photos for psychological intimidation. We're going to the courthouse Monday morning for a permanent protective order." I walked into the hallway and looked at Maya. She was curled up on the sofa, fast asleep, still wearing her little sneakers. She was exhausted because she'd spent the last 24 hours being used as a pawn in a game she didn't even know was being played. "Are you sure about this, Lee?" Mark asked softly. "Once we file this, there is no coming back. The family is over." "They ended the family the second they put a tracking device on a 7-year-old, I said. Monday morning, the flying monkeys arrived. My phone was a war zone by 6:00 a.m. "Pastor Jim, Holly, I'm deeply troubled. Your mother says you're threatening legal action. We need to sit down and pray through this misunderstanding." "Aunt Patricia, your mother is a saint, Lee. She's been crying all night. How can you be so cruel to the woman who gave you life?" Then the Facebook post, Eleanor's Grandmother Martyr Special. "When your own daughter treats you like a criminal for the sin of loving your grandchild. My heart is broken, but God sees the truth. Prayers for those who are lost in their own anger." It had 50 likes and 20 comments by noon, all calling me an ungrateful monster. I didn't delete a single one. I just screenshotted every name for the judge. One heart emoji caught my eye. It was from Caleb's wife, Amanda. She didn't know yet. Caleb was siding with me in secret while his wife was still sending love to the woman trying to destroy us. At the courthouse, the clerk looked at my evidence folder and actually gasped. I paid the $89 filing fee with a smile. The judge granted the temporary restraining order within 2 hours. My parents were served at 4:12 p.m. At 4:17, my phone rang. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. "What have you done?" he screamed into the recording, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and panic. "Your mother is on the floor. She's having a breakdown because of you. Are you happy now? You've finally destroyed this family." I looked at the evidence bag in the passenger seat. The corduroy bear stared back at me with its little button eyes. The next 12 days were a gauntlet of manipulation. Day 2, a legal letter from their attorney suggesting mediation to save face. Sarah laughed and threw it in the shredder. Day 4, Pastor Jim showed up at my house. I didn't even open the door. I just pointed at the no trespassing sign and the copy of the TRO taped to the window. Day 6, my mother actually managed to get into Maya's school by pretending she was there for a surprise lunch. A teacher spotted her loitering near the playground and called me, terrified. We had to have the police escort her off the property. Day 10, my dad tried to corner Mark at a job site. Mark told him to leave or he'd be leaving in handcuffs. But the hardest part was the night before the hearing. I was tucking Maya in, and she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "Mommy, is Grandma sad because of me? Did I do something bad at her house?" My heart physically hurt. "No, baby, you are the best thing in the world. Grandma is she's sick in a way that medicine can't fix, and it's not your job to make her better." But she said I was her angel. Does she still love me? I kissed her forehead. "You'll always be an angel, Maya, but some people use that word like a leash to keep you from flying. I'm just taking the leash off." I went to the kitchen and sat in the dark for an hour. Someone had coached my child to feel guilty. Someone had told her she was responsible for an adult's happiness. If you've ever had to protect your child from the people who were supposed to love them, you know this gut-wrenching feeling. It's the loneliest war you'll ever fight. I was ready for court, but then my phone buzzed. It was Caleb. "Lee, she found the folder. She knows I'm the one who leaked the notebook. She's coming for both of us now." The silence on the other end of the line after Caleb's text was heavy, the kind of silence that feels like the air right before a tornado touches down. "She knows." 2 words that sent a jagged spike of ice through my chest. My mother didn't just find things out. She hunted them. She unearthed them like a forensic investigator looking for a reason to burn your world down. "How did she find out, Caleb? How did she know about the folder?" I whispered into the phone, my hand gripping the counter so hard my knuckles were turning white. "Amanda," he said, his voice sounding like it had been dragged through gravel. "She didn't know I was secretly helping you, Lee. She thought I was just getting involved in the drama again. She's 8 weeks pregnant, she's hormonal, and she's terrified of Mom. She told her about the folder during a phone call this morning because she thought she was venting. She didn't realize she was handing Alina a loaded gun." My mother had called Amanda the second she got that information. She didn't waste a second. She used the voice, the one that sounds like velvet dipped in poison. She told Amanda, "Your husband is betraying his own blood. He's stabbing his mother in the back. Is this really the kind of man you want raising your baby? A man with no loyalty?" Caleb's voice broke. "Amanda is scared, Lee. She doesn't understand why I'm siding with you. She thinks I'm destroying our safety net. She's crying in the other room because Mom told her I'm dead to the family now. And the worst part? She told me I'm cut off. No inheritance, no holidays, no more Lexus. I'm dead to her, Lee, just like you were." "Welcome to the club," I said, a bitter laugh escaping my throat. "She used the same script on me 12 years ago. Same kitchen phone, same refrigerator magnets in the background, same cold-hearted execution." There was a long silence between us, a bridge finally being built over 30 years of resentment. "Are you still willing to testify tomorrow?" I asked. Everything, my daughter's safety, the restraining order, our future, depended on his answer. "Yes," he said, and for the first time in my life, my brother sounded like a man instead of a puppet. "I have to, because if I don't, she'll do this to my kid next. I'm not letting her notebook start with my son's name." I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with Sarah, our paralegal friend, who was slamming caffeine and highlighting my mother's surveillance logs with a yellow marker that looked like a weapon. "The judge is going to grill you, Lee," Sarah warned. "She's going to ask why you waited 34 years to stand up, why you let the toxic grandmother dynamic go on for so long. She's going to ask if you're just being sensitive, which is exactly what Alina's lawyer is going to argue." I looked at the yellow legal pad. Sarah had written the question in massive block letters. "Why did you wait?" Because I was trained from birth to believe that my mother's feelings were my responsibility, I said, my voice finally finding its edge. I was taught that setting a boundary was an act of war. I didn't wait because I was weak. I waited because I was survival-focused. But when she put a tracker on my child, that's not a family feud. That's a crime. Sarah set her pen down. Say exactly that. Don't blink. Don't cry. Evidence doesn't have tear ducts, Lee. It just sits there and tells the truth. I laid out my outfit for the morning, a navy blue blouse and gray slacks. The nurse's uniform for delivering bad news. Mark stood in the bedroom doorway, watching me. He hadn't slept much either. He'd spent the night checking the locks and looking at the security camera footage, paranoid that a Leaner or Bill would show up in the middle of the night to reclaim their property. The hallway of the courthouse smelled like industrial floor wax and old coffee. I saw them before they saw me. Eleanor was sitting on a wooden bench, wearing a floral church dress and her best pearls. She looked like the poster child for graceful grandmotherhood. My father, Bill, sat next to her in his gray suit, looking like he was attending a funeral. When Eleanor saw me, her face did a terrifying cycle. Shock, feigned hurt, then a flash of pure, unadulterated rage that vanished as quickly as it appeared. I walked past her. I didn't speak. She wore her pearls, I wore my evidence. Courtroom 3 was small and cold. Judge Catherine Walsh took the bench, a woman who looked like she'd seen every version of family trauma imaginable. Eleanor's lawyer, Garrett Loomis, stood up first. He was tall, silver-haired, and spoke with a smooth, condescending drawl. Your Honor, he said, my client is a devoted grandmother. She's a pillar of her community. The petitioner, her daughter, has a long history of being overreactive and emotionally delicate. This GPS tracker, it was a gift for the child's safety. Mrs. Miller was simply worried because Lee works long hours. This isn't stalking, it's stewardship. I stood up. My heart was a drum in my ears. I didn't look at my mother. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I began, my voice as steady as it is when I'm calling a code in the ER. Stewardship doesn't involve cutting a mother's face out of every family photograph and sending them to a 7-year-old child. Stewardship doesn't involve keeping a 200-page notebook logging when I buy groceries or what my daughter eats for dinner. And it certainly doesn't involve trying to bribe a witness to lie about child abuse. I opened the folder. Item 1, the Ziploc bag with the tile tracker. The judge took it, looking at the corduroy bear that had been sliced open. Item 2, the erasure photos. I fanned them out on the table, a dozen images of me as a child, each with a jagged hole where my face used to be. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Item 3, the surveillance logs. I read from the October 18th entry. Teacher name Mrs. Koenig. Room 204. School phone number listed. Investigating neglect pattern. The judge looked at Eleanor. Mrs. Miller, did you authorize these logs? Eleanor stood up, her voice trembling with practiced grief. I was just worried. Lee is so unstable, Your Honor. She's always been sensitive. I needed to make sure my angel was being fed. Sit down, Mrs. Miller, the judge snapped. Then I called my final witness, Caleb. My mother made a sound, a choked-off gasp, as her golden boy walked to the stand. For the first time in his life, he didn't look at her for permission to speak. My mother asked me to testify that Lee hit Maya, Caleb told the court, his voice echoing in the silence. She told me she'd pay off my mortgage if I helped her get full custody. She said Lee didn't deserve to be a mother because she was too weak. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a printout of the emails. She even drafted the lies for me to say. I brought them because I won't be part of this cycle anymore. Eleanor went into a full meltdown. Caleb, how could you? After everything I gave you, you're an ungrateful brat, you're just like her. She pointed a shaking finger at me. She took my granddaughter. She's the one who should be in jail. I am the grandmother. I have rights. Mrs. Miller, the judge hammered her gavel. Silence, you are in a court of law, not a church social. The judge turned to my father. Mr. Miller, you delivered the box. Did you know there was a tracking device in that toy? My father stood up slowly. He looked at Eleanor, who was staring at him with 40 years of absolute command. Then he looked at me. He looked at my husband. He looked at the floor. I didn't know about the tracker, he whispered, his voice cracking. But I should have checked. I've been letting her handle things for 40 years. I watched her cut those photos, Your Honor. I watched her do it for 3 hours at the kitchen table. And I didn't stop her. I'm sorry, Lee, I'm so sorry. The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's enforcer had finally broken rank. She was alone. Judge Walsh ruled from the bench. The systematic documentation of the petitioner's schedule, the placement of a tracking device, and the attempt to solicit false testimony demonstrate a clear pattern of criminal harassment. A permanent protective order is granted for a period of 2 years. Eleanor and Bill Miller are prohibited from any contact, direct or indirect, with Lee, Mark, or Maya. She also ordered my mother to undergo a mandatory psychological evaluation before any future petition could even be considered. We walked out of that courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. Caleb was standing by his car, looking lost. "You're going to be a good dad, Caleb," I said, walking up to him. "I had a bad example," he replied, "but I have a sister who showed me what a spine looks like. Amanda and we have a lot of talking to do, but the cycle stops today." 3 weeks later, the house is finally quiet. Not a tense, waiting for the phone to ring quiet. Just peace. Maya asks about Grandma less and less. I bought her a new bear. It's soft, gray fur, and most importantly, it doesn't have a history. She named it Cloud. The flying monkeys have mostly vanished. Pastor Jim stopped calling after Sarah sent him a copy of the court ruling. My father sent one letter saying he was finally in therapy. My mother? She hasn't reached out. Whether it's the law or her pride, I don't care. They told me I was overreacting for 34 years. They used that word to keep me small and silent. But here's the truth. The people who tell you not to overreact are the ones who are terrified of what will happen when you finally stand up. That's my story. A wrapped box, a trembling child, and the day I finally stopped believing the lie that I was the problem. If this story reminded you of someone you know, share it. Subscribe to Real Reddit Revenge, and I'll see you in the next one.